guys, so I am going to go over my what I'm growing this year list for 2026, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm still congested from something that I've been trying to get over since November. It's just not going away. So I'm going to try to talk clearly so that you can understand what I'm saying, but I'm doing my best with this congestion that I've got going on. Anyway, so how I came up with my list is I have all my perennials that continue year to year, which I already have, and then the annuals are based off of my experiences with them in the past, or what I hope to get, or maybe I'm trying something new to see if it'll work out. So the first thing on my list is Acidanthera. It's related to gladiolas, and it did work for me last year, but I let the weeds overtake the bed a little bit. And so even though I didn't sell them because I just couldn't get a good crop out of them, I lifted those bulbs like you do with gladiolas every year, and I stored them, and I'm going to replant them this year, doing a lot better with the weed management, and hopefully I can get those to do really well for me. The next thing on the list is Agapanthus, which did not come up for me, but again, I lifted them. I'm going to try it again this year to see if I can get something off of that. I have Agrostemma, or corn cockle, which is a plant I grow every year. It comes in white and blush and purple. I don't really love the purple, but I don't mind it so much, but I'm really focusing this year on the white and the blush. And for me, these are a one and done. They don't give me a second flush. And I also pack them in really, really tightly because they don't have a huge habit. So I can pack them in really tight and get that first cut, and then it's over. Now I did one year leave my Agrostemma out, and it self-seeded, and I did notice that those that the next year they came back a whole lot better than they did the first year. So this year I am trying to devote a patch to Agrostemma. I'm gonna let those second shoots that come up that are too short to harvest or sell, and I'm going to let them set seed, and I'm going to try to maintain an Agrostemma patch, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, Allium is one that I've had from year to year. Those are perennials. They're already planted out there, so I just have to keep them alive. And I treat my Allium the same way I do my daffodils, in that I let them come up, and I let them just die, all the foliage die in place. I chop it all down once the foliage has turned yellow, and then I just continue to kind of let it grow weeds and then chop it down, let it grow weeds and then chop it down, so that by the time they come back up in the spring, they can come up through a really short layer of dying grasses, which actually will just feed the soil, so it's not a big deal. Okay, Ammi, I'm growing again. Anemone. I'm trying something new this year called Asclepias, or I think it's milkweed or butterfly weed, but I'm not growing it for sale. I'm growing it for purposes of butterflies. But if it ends up being a good cut flower, I'll use it as a cut flower too. Okay, basil I do year to year and love. Bearded iris, again, that's a perennial that's out there already. I don't have to do anything to it. It just comes back every year. And I really love bearded iris. I love their scent. A lot of people don't know, but they have a really great scent, and they only get better and better every year. Bupleurum, I order that in as plugs because I'm not good at starting the seed. So I order those in as plugs, but I am kind of attempting the same thing with the Bupleurum as I am with the Agrostemma, in that I am going to designate a space where it can self-seed, because I've noticed that Bupleurum and as well as the Agrostemma, they self-seed and come back a lot stronger that second year. I think because they have like cold exposure or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but the plugs I grow are never as strong as those the seeds that come back the next year. Celosia is a great flower, especially if you're in our area, which is a 6B. I live near St. Louis, Missouri, and I get the tallest, best celosia, and it's so easy to start, so easy to maintain. It's definitely a winner. One that I have done before, but I didn't do last year, is China Aster. And I think the first year I didn't regrow them again because they were really short. But I feel like I have enough experience now and my beds are aged and they're better now. So I think as I try the China Aster this year, I'm gonna put them in closer and tighter together, and I think that'll force them to get a little bit taller. That China Aster is a good one to grow if you want a late season flower. They're kind of like dahlias and mums. They prefer that tail end of the season. Next on the list is clematis. As of right now, I have about a 40-foot row of clematis that I am just not touching. It comes back on its own every year. I cut it down to the ground every year. And what happens is that root system just gets stronger and stronger, and I love clematis. It's a good one. You have to be kind of careful with clematis because there are some varieties of clematis that are made for the sun and some that are made for the shade. Mine are in a full sun spot, so I have to have the full sun varieties. Next on the list, and this is something new, is called Cleome. I don't know the common name of Cleome, but you can look at a picture because I haven't grown it before. And I'm kind of growing that because I worked with Bee Balm last year, or Monarda is what it's also called, and it didn't do so well for me. I didn't really like it as a cut flower, so I'm kind of trying to see if Cleome, which has a similar shape to it, can be my substitute for Bee Balm. Okay, Columbine is another one that I'm growing, and it has been on our farm now for 3 or 4 years, and I established that patch right when we moved in, pretty much. That is a shade patch, and I don't really have to do anything. It self-seeds and comes back, and I don't even have that patch on water. It's all on its own, and that's a great one to have too because it's really easy to get it to come back year to year. Okay, I have got Cosmos, Daffodil, and this might be my last year for dahlias if I'm being honest with you. They don't really produce enough flowers for me to keep them around. I don't know what I do wrong or what I do, or if we just are in a bad area for dahlias, but I can only get maybe 1 or 2 stems off a dahlia plant, and they're so expensive, and you have to dig them up and you have to store them, and it's kind of a whole thing. And if I'm only getting 1 or 2 flowers off of them, it's just not worth it. So we'll see how this year goes, and then we'll make that determination at the end of the year. But I'm definitely not buying any more dahlias in. Next on my list is Delphinium, which is a perennial. I actually planted it last spring. It did put up a few flowers, but then it died down to the ground. So we'll see in the spring if that comes back up. Delphinium's always been kind of a hard one for me. I'm not so great at keeping it alive. So if it doesn't come back this year, I'm going to do something else in that patch. But if it does come back, I'm going to fill in the rest of the row. I only partially filled it because I didn't want to waste a ton of space on money on something that wasn't going to work. So we'll see how it does this year. Next on my list is Dutch Iris. Now, I treat Dutch Iris as an annual because the bulbs are so cheap. Now, if you had a designated space to put your Dutch Iris, they would come back year after year as long as you left some of that foliage on. I don't leave any of the foliage. I cut it right down to the ground, so it wouldn't come back for me, or it would, but it wouldn't make a flower the next year. So I buy it in as an annual every year. I plant those in the fall, and they come up a little bit after your daffodils and after your tulips. Next on my list is Echinacea. And I love Echinacea, and I have about 4 or 5, 6 different varieties out there at this time. I just have one 60-foot row dedicated to it. It's a perennial. It does come back year after year. For me, it dies down to the ground pretty much in the fall. I don't know if it's getting too much water or what's happening, but it always comes back and it does self-seed. So I find that I really don't have to do much to maintain that patch. Next on my list is Feathertop Grass, which I grew last year for the first time, and I just absolutely loved it. It says it's an annual, but I'm hoping that it drops seed, so we'll see if that comes back or not. If it doesn't, I'll plant it again because it's pretty easy to grow, and it's a wonderful filler. It's very pretty. Next on my list is Frosted Explosion Grass. It's also a decorative grass, and I didn't have enough room last year to grow it, so I'm starting that this year. And again, like, I actually think the Frosted Explosion is a perennial, so I'll put that somewhere where it can stay. Gladiolas, which I grow every year. You do have to lift those and store those. They're actually right behind me right here. And I just store them in like onion bags and plant them out after the last frost, and they do great. They're amazing, and they multiply. So sometimes I'll get 2 or 3 bulbs from one bulb from the previous year, and they do make like little tiny, what they call cormlets, and you can save those and grow those, but I don't mess with them. It's too much work. But if you have a couple of years to devote to growing gladiolas, if that's like your thing, those little ones will grow every year until they eventually produce a flower, but it might take 2 or 3 years. Globe amaranth. New grass for me this year is Greater Quaking Grass. Not sure if that's a perennial or an annual, but and I haven't grown it before, but if it winds up being a good filler, I'll definitely keep that on the list. Hellebores are next, and now I don't have a dedicated patch for hellebores. They're a shade-loving plant. So what I've done, and they're kind of expensive, so what I've done is I've planted them around in my landscape, like all around the farm, where I can find shade. And I just have to be really careful about keeping them watered, but they do come back year after year, and they only get better every year. And they are great in an arrangement. They last forever if you pick them at the right time. Next is hollyhock, which I have not grown before, but I really love them, and I honestly don't know if they're gonna make a good cut flower. So what I'm doing this year is I'm just gonna kind of throw them into my landscape or into a pot. I just wanna see, first of all, if I can grow it, and secondly, if it'll come back on its own. Next is hydrangea. 2 seasons ago, it was 2023, I planted the hydrangea, and they were about this big, not kidding you. It was a teeny tiny hydrangea. I planted my hydrangea about 6 feet apart in a 60-foot row, so I have about 10 of those plants. The next year, I was able to harvest off of those. They were amazing. I could have gotten, I don't know, 10 or 20 cuts from each plant in its second year. Just absolutely amazing. I don't do much with them. I give them some compost at the start of the season. They get watered regularly, but beyond that, I really don't do much with them. Now, the variety I'm growing is Limelight hydrangea, and they do really well in the sun. You've got to be careful with hydrangea that you're not getting the ones that want shade. I mean, you can get them, but just make sure you plant them in shade. Mine are out in full sun pretty much year round, and I don't know if it was the way that I pruned them, because I did prune them. I do all my pruning in February. I don't know if it was the way that I pruned them, but the heads on the hydrangea were reasonable. I didn't grow hydrangea at first because I didn't like how huge their blossom heads were, and I didn't want to have to arrange with like a football in my arrangement, but the heads were actually pretty decent. So I think I probably cut them down to about a foot tall, so I don't know if that makes a difference, but anyway. Okay, so Hypericum's a perennial that I grow on the farm, and I have had Hypericum on the farm for 3 or 4 years now, and they're amazing. They're the ones that make those little berries. They do make flowers, but I don't cut them for their flowers. I cut them for the berries that they produce at the end of the flower cycle, and the bees just love them. So not only do I get to see all the bees and butterflies and everything, but I get those berries at the end, which is really nice. One that is new to me this year is called Leucojum, and I planted it in the fall of 2025. So this will be its first season for me, and I have it in a place where it can be a perennial if it winds up being a good plant. If it doesn't come up for me, we will ditch that. I am also growing lilies this year, which I have grown pretty much not every year, because to be honest with you, I didn't like lilies at the start. I do like them a little bit more now, but they are kind of fussy. Their heads tend to snap off real easy, and they do make a lot of pollen. So you can either remove the pollen prior to selling it, or you can tell whoever buys it that they probably want to remove it because it will stain everything, including the flower. So I'm still not 100% on lilies, but I know that people like them, so I do sell them. And normally I buy those in as annuals, but this year I decided to create a place where they could stay. So they are out there right now because I noticed that there were a couple lilies the previous year that I didn't get that came up this year, and they were pretty awesome. So I'm thinking I won't have to buy them in every year, although I am adding to my collection this year. And I think my favorite lilies are the rose lilies. I'm not sure which kind of lily they are. There are several different kinds. There's like oriental, there's Asiatic. Anyway, there's all kinds of varieties of lilies, but my favorite is the rose lily. Last year I grew Lisianthus for the first time, and I actually sold every single stem. Now I did not start these from seed. I've tried in the past. It's actually pretty funny. One year I started over 1,000 Lisianthus seed, and I think 4 came up. It was terrible. So I do buy those in as plugs. And this year I'm growing a 40-foot row of Lisianthus, and I bought those in as plugs from Farmer Bailey, and they're amazing. I think they're my favorite. They last really long in a vase. They have a variety of different colors, so they don't all bloom at the same time. You can get ones that bloom at different times, and I love them. Okay, so last year I planted a row of lupin, which is a shade, kind of a half shade plant. And I have 4 different varieties of lupin growing in that patch. And they all died down this fall. So I kind of let them go, and I mowed it down late fall, but it's uncovered right now, and I'm hoping that those lupin are gonna come back better this year, kind of like my delphinium patch. So those are kind of, I won't know until this year if that was a good idea or not. But again, I can use that row for something else. Mahogany Splendor hibiscus is a hibiscus that grows in our area very, very well. It does not flower. Now I had someone say to me on one of my past videos, if it doesn't flower, how do you get seed? Well, it has a really, really long flowering cycle. So you'll notice on your seed packets, I believe it says, there's like a days on here, which is a days to flower. For Mahogany Splendor hibiscus, it's something like 200 plus days. So basically what I was saying is, it does produce a flower, but it will not for you unless you live somewhere tropical. So I grow that as a filler. It's a very red, kind of a brown plant, and the birds love it. They hide in there all the time. In fact, one of my biggest problems is the bird poop on my patch. I have to be really careful when I harvest that I don't give someone hibiscus with a bunch of poop on it. So the birds love it. I find praying mantis in there all the time. It's amazing how many cuts you can get. I only plant like 25 plants a year. I could cut off that thing, till the end of time. It lasts forever. Mint is another flower. Well, it does flower, but it's not used for its flowers. But it's another plant that I'm growing for filler. Not only does it have a great smell, but it lasts forever, and it's beautiful. And it, like I said, it does make a flower. It's like a purple flower, and the bees love it. I'm specifically talking about mountain mint. There are several varieties of mint. Mountain mint is one that I planted a long time ago. I actually planted it as a companion plant to some vegetables that I was growing, or some fruit. I can't remember which it was, but anyway, it wound up taking over the entire bed, and it comes back year after year, and you can get 1,000,000 cuts off of very little mint. So I definitely recommend that. Mock orange is another one that I'm growing, and I actually planted the mock orange 2 years ago. I wasn't able to cut off of it last year, so I'm hoping to be able to cut off of it this year, because it will be its almost third season. I guess I planted it in the fall, so it's not quite 3 years old yet, but okay. So mullein, or I think it's a verbascum of some kind. I forget its full name, but it's spelled M-U-L-L-E-I-N, and I am growing 2 varieties of that this year. One is called Southern Charm, and the other one is a white. I just don't remember the name of it, but I'm starting those from seed. I started them from seed last year, I only bought 5 seeds because I wasn't sure how it would work out. All 5 germinated. I planted them out and they did amazing. They really liked the tail end of the season, which is great because you're always looking for stuff to fill your gaps. So I'm planting more of it this year and I'm really excited. It's a spike flower and I'm thinking it will come up in the spring and the fall, but we'll see. Next on the list is mums, and I have grown these, I think, 5 years at this point. I have tried saving my mother plants from year to year and have failed miserably, so I don't do that anymore. I order them in from several different places. King's Mums is a good one. Clara Joyce is another person I order them from, and then there are a bunch you can look online, but I ordered them in as cuttings. And mums also grow, they start flowering in the fall, so it's kind of difficult. I really wish I had a tunnel because I think that would extend their season a whole lot more, but I just get what I can off of them until they actually will last past a first frost. So for me this year, they didn't die back until we got a really hard frost. So if you're in my zone 6B, I would say order those earlier blooming mums. There should be, when you purchase the mum, there should be a time frame, or at least I know King's Mums tells you about when the mum is gonna bloom. Buy those earlier blooming mums, not the later blooming ones. Mums bloom according to daylight cycle, so that's why they start in the fall when those days get shorter. By the time the days get short enough that those later blooming mums come out, it's past our frost date. So I always buy the earlier blooming varieties. I currently have a patch of oriental poppies outside. Now, they haven't done so well, so I'm probably gonna give up on that. I love them. They're amazing and they're huge. I don't know how well they would do as a cut flower, but if you're looking for something fun to put into your landscape, oriental poppies are awesome. Orlea is another plant that I am growing this year that I grow every year. It's a beautiful filler flower. I am trying to do a patch with I'm kind of sharing one row between Bupleurum and Orlea, and I buy those in as plugs every year. So last year I had enough plugs to fill half a row with Orlea and Bupleurum, and when it died back, I let it set seed. I covered the half that had nothing in it, and this year I bought plugs in to fill that other half, and I'm hoping the front half that I grew last year is gonna put up seeds, because Orlea, Agrostemma, Bupleurum, they all do really, really well if they come up during that colder part of the year. Phlox is another seed that I am starting this year. I actually bought in plants last year because I hadn't had the best of luck starting seed, but I feel like I'm a little more experienced now and I should be able to get those to germinate and hopefully add a whole lot more phlox to my farm, because I really love the phlox that I grew last year. It didn't get tall enough for me to take cuts off of it, so I just kept cutting it back every time it bloomed so that I could help that root system establish. It's gonna come back up again in the spring and I can't wait to see how it goes. You gotta be really careful with phlox because some phlox are shorter and some phlox are tall enough that you can harvest off of them. So just be really careful when you're buying either the plants or the seed that you check the height on those and whether or not they are annuals or perennials. I'm not sure that all varieties are perennial. This year I'm trying the pumpkin patch again. I've done a couple tests with pumpkins around my farm and I think I have finally found the right place to put them. They are very susceptible, at least in our area, to those squash bugs and to animals that like to eat the pumpkin. So I have to have the pumpkin growing in my in my backyard where the dogs can kind of ward off other animals from eating them. They also like a ton of water. I don't think I realized how much water they love, but when I have them on the watering system, they do 1,000 times better than when I try to grow them out and just hand water them. I am growing ranunculus this year. I think that they would do so much better with a tunnel. I'm hoping at some point to have a tunnel. So really all that I'm doing now is I'm trying to keep my corms alive year to year until I can finally put them out in a tunnel. So I've got about 200 corms, I think that's what you call them. And I planted them out last year. I planted them out the year before that. Some years they do better than others. I think I just haven't quite gotten that correct timing on those. I know that they like a long spring and we don't have a long spring. So I do try to start them indoors, then get a head start, and then I try to put them out in March and just cover them if it's ever gonna get below 30 degrees. I have a ton of roses growing on the farm. I have at least 3 different areas where I grow them in, and I love the roses. Most of them are from David Austin roses, and my biggest problem with roses are that they get rose rosette disease really bad. I lose at least 5 roses to rose rosette disease, and so I looked up online like what I can do to prevent that, and basically there's not a lot you can do. You can separate your roses to keep things from spreading. So in other words, don't plant a whole row of roses. Make sure you put plants in between them. And the other thing is, if you find wild roses on your property, you can get rid of those, and that will help with the issue. So as I'm pulling out these roses that are infected, because once they have it, all you can do is burn the plant. You can't save your rose bush, which is really sad. As they get that disease, I'm going to replace the roses with something else. The Rudbeckia or Black-Eyed Susan is another one that I'm growing. It is a perennial. I had tried to establish a patch last year and it was overcome with weeds. So I basically just am covering that patch this year. I'm suppressing all of the weed growth, and then in the spring I will replant it, hopefully thick enough that it can sustain itself and come back year to year without having to worry too much about the weeds. Scabiosa is next on the list. I'm growing a couple different varieties. There are Fama Scabiosa, which are perennial, and then there are regular Scabiosa, which are annuals. I planted Famas in the fall, and they did really well. They were alive when winter hit, so I'm hoping those will come up strong in the springtime. They're really beautiful flowers. I've grown them in the past. I just didn't understand the timing on those. So even though I grew them, they were kind of not so great. The Scabiosa I'm growing, I'm actually really excited. I bought in some plugs from Farmer Bailey that are they're like the Bon Bon Scoop series. They're supposed to be a whole lot bigger. Although now I'm kind of rethinking that because I feel like Scabiosa are meant to be small. I've noticed that when I order in the Scabiosa that are really big and impressive, their heads are broken because the stem just can't sustain the weight of the bloom head. So I'm trying Bon Bon this year. We'll see how it goes. If I don't like it, I'm going to go back to the regular varieties because I do like Scabiosa. And even though those giant heads are very beautiful and impressive, if they're going to snap all the time, it's just not worth it. Shirley Poppy are next. And like I said when I did my seed starting video on the Shirley Poppies, I'm growing those just for me. I love them. They make me happy. Not the best cut flower. Snapdragon are next. Last spring, I planted Solomon Seal out in a shade patch, and you forget how hard it is to hand water everything, and so I kind of neglected it, and I'm not sure if it's going to come back this year. I will eventually have to do a dedicated row of Solomon Seal because it's just so beautiful, but I need to make sure I've got it in the right place and with water set up so that I don't lose it, because they're expensive and it's not worth buying in if you're not going to take care of it. Statice is a plant that I do every year. I think Statice is amazing. You can get so many cuts off of Statice. Last year I grew about 4 different varieties. The white does the best for me, and I noticed that even after I took initial stems off of it, it produced even more. It just kept going, so that's a good one. It does have kind of a unique shape to it, which I think makes it hard to design with, but if you trim out those side branches, it can be a lovely addition to your bouquet. This year I'm doing straw flower again. I did it, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought it was weird, and I also thought it didn't do very well for me. But this year I've got a better understanding of plant spacing, and so I think, and also watering needs. It doesn't need a lot of water. So I'm going to do that again this year. Plant them in really tight and not water them as much as I did the previous years. Sunflower is one I do every year. Easy peasy. If you're looking for a starter plant, sunflower are perfect. Sweet pea, which I'm actually getting ready to start here pretty soon. Now, sweet pea don't get very tall, at least not the varieties that I grow, but they smell amazing and they are my favorite flower. So I attempt every year to get everyone on board with the sweet pea. We'll see if it works this year. I love them. I put them in tiny bouquets, like in glass jars, and they last about 5 days, I want to say, so not terribly long, but beautiful, and they smell so good. Sweet rocket, or I think it's also called Dame's rocket, might have another name too, is one that I grow every year. It's just easy. It's a fall planted biennial. So I planted it this past fall. It's going to come up in the spring. It is a great filler. I think it comes in purple, white, and like a lavender color. This year I'm growing the purple. In some areas it's considered invasive, so I do not let it go to seed. I harvest off of it, and then when I'm done with it, like when those, sometimes those second shoots, you can tell they're not going to be tall enough to be usable stems, I will just pull it all out of the ground so that it doesn't set seed. Now, I have probably let it go from time to time. It's gotten away from me, and it has not appeared anywhere else on my farm. So I can confidently say that it's not invasive. I have other plants that are way more invasive than Sweet Rocket. Next up are tulips. I treat these as an annual, which is kind of a bummer because they're expensive. So they do cost a lot. I have to charge my customers quite a bit for them, which is kind of hard because they can be shipped in from overseas a lot cheaper. However, now that those tariffs are going, maybe it will be cheaper to buy them at home, which would be really nice for me. I plant them in the fall, and then in the spring I harvest them with their bulb, and I just throw the bulb away. I have tried saving the bulbs and growing them the next year. It does not work out. They don't come back. Viola is another flower I'm growing this year that I use as a bedding plant. I do not grow these for cut flowers. They are way too short, and I'm not sure how they would do as far as vase life goes. So I grow them to plant around my roses specifically, because I want the rose roots, or I want the rose shoots, those new shoots that are coming up from the ground, I want them to be able to get through the ground. I want the rose bush to be able to grow, but I also want to suppress the weeds. So I plant these around my roses, and they self-seed. So they're not a perennial, but they will come back year to year because they self-seed. Weigela is a perennial that I started 2 or 3 years ago, and it's actually doing a lot better for me than the mock orange. I put them in at the same time. So if you're interested in which would do better, the answer is Weigela, and I have 2 different varieties. I have Wine and Roses, and I have Wine and Spirits. The Wine and Spirits is white, makes a white flower. The Wine and Roses is pink. They're amazing, amazing plants. They produce so many usable stems, and they're also great as filler. So once the flowers are gone, you can still use the foliage in your flower arrangements. Yarrow is one that I grow every year. It's so easy to start from seed. They are perennials. I've heard that they only do good for 2 or 3 years, and then you have to restart them. So what I've done is, 2 years ago, I started a third of a row, and it didn't do so hot, but it came back the next year, and it was amazing. And so every year since then, I've started a third of the row. So this year, I'll be filling in the rest of that row, and I'm just kind of monitoring that first planting to see how it does this year. If it comes back amazing, I'm not going to worry about it. If it comes back spotty, or it doesn't come back as tall, I'll remove it and start that third again, and I'll just keep doing that so that I always have an entire row of yarrow, of which at least 2/3 of that's going to be usable. Okay, last plant on the list is zinnia. Zinnia are far and away, at least for me, the easiest plant to grow. They have an excellent germination rate. They are not fussy at all. You will get 1,000 cuts off of a zinnia plant. You don't need very much, and it goes a very long way. So I definitely recommend it if you're in the area. And that is it for what I'm growing in 2026. I think I'll do another video about what I'm not growing. That might be just as useful to some people who are in my same area. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helps you to make choices about what you're going to grow this year.